Is it ethical, Lawrence?
But please attack only afterwards. I hear this button is very dangerous right now. We have a ton of them, if anybody feels
Thank you.
inclined.
All right, so we're a little late, so I'm going to try and pick this up, right, Lawrence?
Yep.
Lawrence and I are doing this together. After we're done, please come up and take whatever you'd like. We have some screen wipes and some literature. So, you want to start, or should I just? All right. So this is the tutorial part. This is kind of getting to the nuts and bolts. It's sort of where Lance did this morning and what he'll be doing tomorrow, but I'm going to kind of just squeeze it into one thing and do it as quickly as possible since we're very late. So the key players, the peer review process. Who are the key players? Obviously, we have the authors who want to publish their paper. We have the editors who want to ensure quality publications. We have the referees who represent the opinion of the community and review the paper for us. And then we have divisional associate editors and editorial board members who are adjudicators. Well, we'll go more into that a little bit later. So, in the end, why do we do all of this? We do this because we want to ensure quality publications for the readers. And this indirectly will also benefit all the authors because you're going to get cited more and recognized more and so on and so forth. So the peer review process. This is another outline of the peer review process. I'm going to go through this step by step, so this is just the overview. Since we're a little short on time, I'm just going to go through the different players. So the authors want to publish the paper. So what do you have to do? I kind of broke this out into before writing a paper, when writing a paper, and when submitting your paper. But as I said, Lance did such a great job. I'm just going to go through this really quickly, if it will. So before writing the paper, consider the audience you're trying to reach. Who are you trying to reach? Are you trying to reach the applied physics community? Are you trying to reach the condensed matter physics community? What is your take-home message? And we've talked a lot about authorship. So think about the authorship and the acknowledgement. As already said before, it's good to kind of think about this even while you're doing your research. Jot down who did what so that you have a good, sometimes, after a year, you're not quite sure who did what when. So it's a good idea to have that in mind. So when writing the paper, again, keep the take-home message in mind at all times and think of how to help the readers make use of the results. Don't write the manuscript for yourself. You're the experts in writing the manuscript. You've done the experiments, run the simulations, done all of these things. You know all the details. The rest of us don't. So make sure that you put all the details in so the rest of us can can understand it. And of course, I'm going to talk about this more about suggested referees, related papers, justification, and other relevant information when you submit the paper. We'll do that a little later. So, in the end, though, everybody thinks that they're a great writer, or maybe not, but it's very important to self-review your paper. Look at it critically, see where you are. Is this really a PRL, or is this really a Nature Physics, or is this better in PRB? You have to kind of be honest with yourself, because that also saves you time in the end. Anything to add, Lawrence?
I think this is pretty much everything. Well, self-review is one thing. Have your colleagues look at it. Yeah?
Yes.
And if you're a group of people, as authors, go to another colleague who's not an author if you're uncertain of the quality of the paper.
You want to change? Oh, you want to change this battery? Okay. So I'll keep on talking while he changes the battery. So I'm going to run through this. As I said, Lance did such a good job. I'm just going to run through this really quickly. Template here is a physical review letter. So here, the title. It should be concise, precise, accurate, and informative. The author list, very, very important. We've talked about this several times, so everybody knows what you have to do. You should include all people who made significant contributions, and I understand the word significant can be a little squishy, but we've gone over that. The abstract, explain very briefly the problem of the study and the main findings. Avoid any background. The title and the abstract are things that usually people can read without paying for anything. So this is your chance to dazzle people, the reader, so that they'll actually click on the paper and read it. Introduction, the problem tackled, the motivation, the importance, and a brief review of the contribution. Methods, obvious. You explain your theory, simulation experiments, design a derivation, keep reproducibility in mind. Oops. And the results, explain and discuss findings, models and fits, measurements, uncertainties, assumptions, alternative interpretations, so on. And again here, the take-home message, I kind of stress that. Talk about the open questions, the impact. Acknowledge all the people, including organizations, who have helped you, whether it be grants, people who helped you do things. Don't acknowledge your cat, because I've had that happen. Acknowledging God is also not a good idea. We don't print that. I've actually had all of these things happen, so. And then the reference list, of course, include relevant or related papers.
Yeah, so funding organizations these days are very sensitive to being mentioned explicitly and probably even with your project number. So don't forget to do that. Otherwise, you end up with problems if you have to report back on what you did with your money.
So, supplemental material. This was touched upon. More and more people are submitting supplemental material, partly because of certain journals. They encourage it to the point that, let's put it this way. For us, it is important to remember that the paper should be self-contained. You should not need to go and read the supplemental material to understand the paper. That's very important. It should not be used to avoid the length limit. Just because PRL has that length limit doesn't mean that you can squish everything into the supplemental material and try to get it published as a PRL or a rapid communication. It should be in the style of the journal. Now movie and video files can be included in the paper itself, of course the online version, obviously. And one thing I do tell the authors is that in our case, the supplemental material is not touched by the production department. So make sure that there are no errors in the document. So
Yeah, so in general, I'd say keep the supplement as short as possible. Well, of course, we get lots of stuff that comes from these journals that advocate these supplements, and it's usually very painful, the refereeing process afterwards, because you come with a manuscript which is way too short and ununderstandable, and basically the advice that you usually get from referees in that case is, why don't you make a full paper out of this? And you should really consider that for yourself. You should not really shorten your paper only for it to be presented in one of these high-level journals. And if you want to go there, just make a short presentation. Usually the supplementary material is wasted.
Okay, so just before submitting a manuscript, spell check and proofread it. It doesn't make a very good impression to the editor when there's a typo in your title. That isn't a good thing. If English is an issue, ask your colleague for help. I mean, obviously, Lawrence, it's always good to ask a colleague to read it so that, for you to know that you've put everything in there. But if English is an issue, just
so if you happen to have a native speaker around,
right?
Yeah, jump on him. That helps a lot.
Or somebody who's very good at English. Check the journal format and style. The journal websites usually have that. Go read it. It's always a good idea. It's like, you apply for a job, you don't want to say, I'm applying for this job at IBM, and you're actually writing to, HP. It just doesn't give you a good impression. So just, make sure that it looks like the journal that you're submitting it to. I had gone into these topical descriptors a little bit. I don't know, you guys are too young. We used to have this thing called PACS, where you used to classify papers that it was discontinued. So the APS has come up with these fish keyword-like system. So you can do that, and then for journals like PRX and PR Applied, we have these subject area markers that I had talked about. That helps later also because that gets put into the searches. So when your paper gets published and people want to search all papers on semiconductors or whatever, that particular type, they will put that in, and then you will be found. And then the cover letter. So explain in non-technical language the motivations, backgrounds of the research performed, and the implication of its findings. But again, I'll talk about that later.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, cover letter is not obliged for all journals at FISREF, but I would simply encourage you to do it all the time because it's really a big help for us.
So important points to bear in mind. I don't mean to kind of, beat the dead horse, but these are all very important things. By submitting this manuscript, this is what the corresponding author certifies. So the corresponding author has a very important job, and it certifies that the paper represents original work by the listed authors, is presented accurately, reflects the scientific results. All the authors make significant contributions. Again, here it comes back again to authorship. All the authors listed are aware of and agree to the submission. The manuscript has not been published anywhere else, or even under consideration. That as part of the submissions, the authors has provided us with any relevant information, like, for example, relevant unpublished manuscripts. If you have a related unpublished manuscript that we don't have access to, send it to us, because that, again, avoids us having to get back to you and then you having to get back to us. It saves time. And that the authors accept established procedures for selecting manuscripts for publication. So all of these are things that you agree to when you push that submit button in FISREF. So, the cover letter. Help the editors and the referees help you. This is your chance with the cover letter. A good cover letter should contain, as I said, the motivation of the research, the problem approach, and essential results. Justify why your work is important. Some journals require justification. We do. FISREF B, Rapid Communication does. PRL does, but it's always a good idea to have one, because you're just helping us do our job more easily, that we don't have to delve into it as much. Previous work, especially theories of results, questioned by your work. Let us know the context of your work. Suggested referees and undesirable referees. And tell us who you don't want it sent to, but be reasonable. Do not send this to anybody in Germany and France is not reasonable. I have had that happen. This is a quote. So, anything to add for the cover letter?
No, just cut it a bit cool on the undesirable referees. If there really is a conflict of interest, of course we need to know. And also, we do not guarantee we won't send anything there. We might just use one of these undesirables just to see whether things really are as bad as you claim they are.
Yes, and that's the other thing that some people do, right? You acknowledge somebody that you don't want us to send it to. That's also not very ethical.
But a good trick.
Trust us, we find out a lot of things. And again, anything else you think that we might need to know, related papers, whatever, I mean, that's all kind of self-explanatory. This is a tutorial, so I try to make it a little bit funny if I can. So these are...
I have a short question, if you can go back.
Go back?
Okay,
Yes.
my microphone. If you submit to PRL, on top of the cover letter, there is a short motivational letter which is up to 100 words, I think.
Mm-hmm.
What's the advantage of doing this for your journal?
What do you mean?
What's the use of this?
The motivation?
Yeah, the motivation.
It's a justification. We usually, if there's enough information that's interesting, we send that on to the referees. So
You have to say why this is important enough for PRL.
Right.
And then the editor will judge whether he or she believes what you're saying or not.
So you need the cover letter and this motivational statement.
Oh, you mean whether it can be... Well, the cover letter encompasses more. The motivational statement is really more this part of it. Just in a short, succinct... It's like a teaser, where somebody would read it and kind of understand what are you studying, how is this solving a problem, where... Put your work in context. So it's kind of this part, so to say. You don't have to repeat it,
I see.
if that's what you mean.
Okay.
Okay? Any more questions? I'm running along, so yeah, if anybody wants to say something. So these are some of the quotes that we have collected over the years at the APS, and these are actual quotes. This is an example of the fact that scientific progress usually proceeds incrementally, sometimes in unbearably small steps. We believe that our paper represents one of these steps. Doesn't really do a good
This is not a good way to get into
job.
PRL.
Yes. And you asked for justification for a rapid. We are pleased to tell you that all the authors agree that this should be a rapid. Also, not really that helpful. So
But
try
you
to
get
think of
ethics.
things.
This is all real stuff.
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, as I said, you acknowledge your cat. I've had people acknowledge God. I've had people acknowledge a lot of different things. Okay, the next key player in this game, or players, are the editors. So we want to ensure, obviously, the quality publications. And what is the editor's role in the review process? We assess the paper when it's submitted. We select the appropriate referees, assess the contents of the reports and rebuttals, and make the final decision. That is basically our job. Of course, it gets broken down into many different ways. And, whoa. Okay. Now, in general, I had mentioned in my talk about PR Applied, like there's only two of us, Matt and myself at PR Applied. So we're not generally the technical experts for whatever. I mean, if I'm looking at a biological physics paper, I kind of know what's going on, but I'm not the technical expert. In PRB, it's somewhat different. You have a larger staff. The scope is more.
We've also made some changes in the way we handle incoming manuscripts. So at FISRB, editors are more or less specialized in a sub-area of condensed matter physics, which means that they really are a bit more of an expert than not a technical expert. But of course, there's many areas, and you cannot never be an expert in, or have an expert in all of these areas. But so at FISRB, and this is a general trend, I think, at APS, we're getting clusters of editors specialized in certain areas that work for various journals that serve these areas.
Yeah, and don't forget, although I might not be a biological physics expert, I have a colleague down the corridor who is. So I will then bring that paper over to them and ask them, this doesn't look quite right to me, what do you think? And I'll make my decision, with that discussion in mind. So, but we do make sure that the referees are the experts, that the reports are detailed and substantiated, that there are no obvious conflicts of interest, and the review process is timely. So this is what we try to do within the process. So that's basically our goal, to conduct an impartial and thorough scientific review of your work, and actually to improve your manuscript through the process. I don't know why I'm... So, when the manuscript gets submitted, there we go, it goes through an internal review. That's us. We look at it, and when the first time an editor sees a paper, these are some of the questions, not all, some of the questions we ask. Does the paper meet the journal's publication criteria? Does it contain new and significant physics? Is it written for a correct audience? And is the subject matter appropriate? And then we will make a decision of whether it gets sent out to review or not. We can reject it without external review when the paper, in our opinion, does not meet one of these criteria. And sometimes it actually works to your advantage, because here's a quote: "In view of our assessment, we are not sending a paper, your manuscript, out for review, and suggest that you consider submitting your contribution to a journal focused on chemical physics." And sometimes the authors do come back and say, "A moment of reflection caused me to see the logic in this decision. I completely agree. Thanks for nudging us in the right direction." Now, not everybody's that nice, but we do get, people who say, "Yeah, you're right. We should have thought about this a little more."
So one thing we also look at a little bit. Yep.
On making this decision of suggesting another journal, are you assisted by any software, or is it just a human decision?
It's not software-based, no.
Okay.
It's a human decision.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, obviously, we don't know what the publication criteria of, a journal of chemical physics is, and we can't make any decisions or any. But we think that for us, it's too chemical physics, for example.
We have defined scopes for our journals, and if we think it is too far out, we don't do that. So sometimes we have these issues simply because a lot of papers get sent to PRL, but we don't have, so if they are not accepted in PRL, then people often tend to go one down the ladder. but FISRB is not covering all of PRL. And so there are issues there, and then you might get a letter like that. One thing that I wanted to say here also, a reason for not sending things out could be that we don't think the paper is sufficiently readable. So, because we cannot really present our referees with something that is not really understandable English. So we will have a look. If it's really too bad, we'll just send it back. We could also send it out, but still request the authors to improve the English later on.
I mean, referees are doing this job for us. You know, it's like a community service, and so we try to make it as easy as possible for them. And so we don't want to burden them with something that they can't really understand. So yes, that's one thing that we also look at. So this internal review that we do, we decide whether we're going to, reject it. If we do reject it, you can always resubmit. The physical review is a very transparent kind of, we have a transparent peer review process. We will always reconsider. If you have arguments, if you think we made a mistake, we'll always listen. If we reject it again, you do have recourse. You can go and appeal either to an editorial board member for the physical review or divisional associate editors for PRL. I mean, they both are basically the same function, but they're called something different. And once in a blue moon, it'll go to the appeal to the editor-in-chief. That is usually completely, utterly procedural. So in my years there, I don't know how many we've ever...
No, it does happen, but the editor-in-chief will not look at the scientific content of the paper. So he cannot say this is important enough to go to PRL. He can only look at whether the procedure has been followed according to the book.
So as long as the procedure is followed?
If the procedure is followed, then it's out, simply. It's like that. So the decision on the scientific level is done by this editorial board member. And I may be looking at things to make sure things are all kosher, because there also can be conflicts of interest in these board appeals, but I will not usually scientifically interfere. But we have to make sure that things are done correctly.
Yeah, we have some sticky situations. Then, in here we will go and, talk to the lead editor of the respective journal, and then also decide, at that point it might be decided that we could send it out to review. I mean, that's always a possibility. So let's say we go out to external review. So the referee selection. I promised that I would say a few words about this. So we have all these different places that we have information. So we have the referee's publication history with the physical review, obviously, and obviously in other journals, because you can do a Google search. You can look, Web of Science, Scope is all here, bibliography, Web of Science, and then the author suggestions too. We look at that. And then, of course, we have our own database. We all go to conferences. We kind of know the players. So there's sometimes you get a paper and you know exactly who you're going to send it to if that person is available. So all of that together with the database of the 70,000 active referees, we select a set of them to review your paper. So editors now tend to avoid sending papers to the following individuals. However, having said that, this is not a rule. This is just some more of a guidance. So don't, I know that some people try to play games with the this sort of in the lower part of this, but okay, so co-authors. We usually don't send it to your recent co-authors, your current or recent co-authors. Referees at the same institution as the authors, we usually try to avoid them because, well, for obvious reasons. People who acknowledge, but we will find out if you're acknowledging somebody just for the sake of acknowledging them. Direct competitors. Now, there are times that we will send it to them, but don't forget, we know who these people are. So we will get the report back and we will read the report with this in mind. So it's not that it's kind of done in a vacuum. Obviously, busy referees who are currently reviewing for FISREV or PRL, overburdened referees, we usually don't want to send more than 15 manuscripts to them per year. Consistently slow referees, we keep track. So we keep track of how many weeks it took you to send us a report back. And so if somebody is always going to take 8 weeks, we try to avoid them. And then, of course, referees who consistently provide poor reports like, oh, this is fine, publish it as is, or this is crap, don't publish it. Well, it doesn't help us. So if we find that people just give us these unsubstantiated reports, we tend to...
So referees get a grade for their report, and this is kept in store. So you all have a grade somewhere.
Okay, so now the editor has chosen some referees and the paper is sent out to review. So we'll talk about being a referee your role as a referee later in the process. So for now, let's assume that the referee comments have been have come back and we've sent it to the authors. So at that point, of course, the review comes back, we look at it, we either reject or accept the paper. That's some of the... so again, if we reject it, you get the same... you can go and appeal to the editorial board member or the editor-in-chief. But generally what happens is that you have a couple of rounds. So in PRL, they kind of sort of have a strict 2-round rule, although once in a while they'll break it. Actually, most of the PR journals do. But I think the Phys Rev are a little, I mean, especially in PR Applied, if I can see that the paper is moving towards publication, that we are making stride, then, I mean, I'm going to not cut it off after 2 rounds. Then we'll go for a 3rd round. And I think it's the same with B. I mean, at least that was when I was there. So, resubmissions. Should I resubmit my paper? What does the letter say? Does it invite resubmission? Does it direct you to another journal? Read the letter. If you're resubmitting to PR or from PRL to PR, use the old code and answer the referee's criticism. Consider expanding the paper now, and since you're not bound by the PRL 4-page limit. A lot of people try to do this. They have a PRL, they get 2 negative reports, substantial negative reports. They turn around, send it to us, either to B or to Applied, and say, we would like to submit this paper. Well, that's not going to fly because we know, so we're going to go back to you and say, well, we know that this was a PRL and these are the reports. You need to respond to the reports. So you have to respond to the reports because we will ask for it. And have you done everything to ensure that the manuscript informs the reader why it's important and how significantly it advances the field? Again, your resubmission is your way to convince us and the referees that your paper is publishable.
Yeah. So for resubmission, the coding is kind of terse. There's official phrases that are being used to say whether you can resubmit or not. If nothing is being said, you can also resubmit. This is not being said. So that leads to some misunderstandings every now and then. If it's really saying go away, you better go away.
So, how can I make an effective resubmission? Answer all criticisms. Point by point is nice. Be factual and collegial. As I said, the purpose of the resubmission letter is to convince the editor that your paper deserves further consideration, so that we will send it out to review again. Or sometimes we'll accept it, depending on the situation. There we go. So, these are just, again, point-by-point response to the referees. So when you agree with the referee's criticism, provide a response, revise the paper, and describe the changes, significant changes. When you disagree with the referee's criticism, take responsibility about misunderstandings. Whenever possible, provide your counter-arguments calmly and matter-of-factly. Include a revised manuscript and an explicit list of major changes. And you may include confidential information for the editors. Now, I understand that you've done this work, this is your baby, you've written it up, and now somebody comes along and says, it's not good enough. It may make you angry. Don't be angry, because all the referee wants to do is they want to help you get this paper published. So, if you disagree with them, just answer them in as calm a manner as you can. Now, if you think that the referee is biased for whatever reason, you can always tell us in a confidential information to the editors that you think that he or she has completely missed the point, you want to explain why, and that some referees hold too strongly to a point of view. You might want to send us some update on recent published or unpublished related papers, whatever it may be that you don't want the referee to know, but you want us to know, you can add it to the confidential information for the editor.
Always remain very polite to the referees when you address them directly. Don't escalate things. But you can tell us, of course.
And even if you want us not to send it back to the same referee, and even if we do agree with you and send it to another referee, don't forget that the next referee is also reading your response. And referees do not take kindly to that when there's too much emotion showing. Even if it wasn't their report, they do get upset too. So there's no point. And I think tomorrow, Lance is going to go much more into this, so I'm just going to fly through this. Common misconceptions when you resubmit a paper, or I'd like to say arguments that are not arguments. The subject is very important, so you should publish the paper. Well, the subject may be important, but are your results important? That's really the key. The referee found no mistake, just said that it is not interesting. Well, correctness is not sufficient for publication in FISREV. 2 referees were positive, only 1 was negative. Doesn't matter, it's what the referees say that counts. And we don't count votes. This is not about voting. This is not a democracy. And many papers that were published in this topic in FISREV, well, maybe it's enough already. You know, if there is more, then you need to tell us why, if there's so many papers already, why should we publish another one? What is so much better in this one than the 10 others that have come before you?
Maybe you can say something, how much you weigh in the seniority of the referee so that people would appreciate this a bit better. For instance, I could see an old guy saying wrong things and a younger guy making the correct point. And is this an issue that you guys look at? Is this for the audience?
Yes. We have a lot of information about the referees, don't forget. We know where they are, we know who they are, we know how senior they are, we know, we basically know things about the referee. So every decision we make is a balance, and that's why I say it's not vote counting, and it's not a democracy, because it depends. The situation is so it's always a judgment call when we make these decisions. And we counter all of these, balance all of these different things together to reach a decision. You okay? You want some water?
Yeah, sorry, I'm fine. I just wanted to say something.
Yeah, let me give you some water. Talking too much.
Yeah, just. If you get 3 referees, it usually means that one of these 3 referees is not a very experienced one. And of course, we know which one it is. So this is one of the good reasons that this 2-to-1 vote thing doesn't count. We have to try out younger people, and that's what we do a lot.
Yeah, I had a friend ask me one time, oh my God, you really must have not liked my paper because you sent it to 3 referees. Mind you, I actually recuse myself when I actually work on Friends Pay. We all do that for each other. When I feel that sometimes it is because I'm going to be too harsh, because I'm going to overcompensate. So I usually then give it to Matt, and Matt does it. And we all have that, where we just think, you know what, it's unethical for me to get involved in this, so I'm going to give it over to a colleague. If you get 3 referee reports, it's because it's, as Lauren said, we want to try one guy out, or one gal out, and we always pair them, at least with 2 experienced people, so over time we can, cultivate them.
Yes. Is there any relation between the number of referees you send a paper and, your doubt as an editor of the quality of the paper?
It's not going to be the number of referees so much as the experience of the referees and the subject area of the referees. The number of referees, there are many, many reasons why we might have more. One of them is because we want to try them out. If it's an experimental plus theory paper, for example, if there are 2 experiments that are very, very, unlike each other, and we want information on both pieces, or if one piece.
So don't read too much in the number. But
right.
if we have
yes,
doubts,
I had once one paper of mine sent to 5 referees. It wasn't unusual.
That's That's a lot. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that is very unusual, but I'll tell you how that happens. It sometimes happens when we send the referrals out and we get no response. So we basically give up on these first sets of referees. Let's say we send it to 3, right? We give up on them, and then we send it to 2 more. Suddenly, these 3 referees wake up and send us reports. And then we have 5 reports, and we're like, oh dear. So sometimes, in rare occasions, that happens. You know.
But if we have doubts about the scientific validity of a paper, we know what referees we want.
Okay, so now more quotes from this time from resubmission letters. We have revised our manuscript only according to the comments of referee A. We have not taken into consideration the comments of referee B, who clearly completely misunderstood the main points of our manuscript. It is unfortunate that referee C repeats this mistake. Why is, actually this is quoted, but the English is incorrect. What is so special in my manuscript that you have sent it to 3 referees? I guess that's the same question that you had. To save time to publication, we decided not to respond to the criticisms of referee A. Well, that doesn't save you any time. I bet our paper is wrong. I normally have a fight to get into a paper in PRL. My PRL colleagues found that very funny. Our paper has no conclusion because we wanted to save space. And who's referee D who is allowed to act as a dictator? And I bow to your decision, although I still maintain that the first referee is an ignoramus. All of these really doesn't help you in your quest to get your paper considered.
Of course, it's good for some conversations at Rich.
Yes. This is what, once in a while we have to laugh about something, so. Okay, so here we are. So we get to the first, sorry, yes?
But I've seen these quotes before, of course.
Yes.
But I don't remember seeing any quotes directed to the editors. Do you guys get something like that as well?
We do.
You don't want to show any?
No, usually it's, as I said, I think I have said this in Sao Paulo. People have tried to get me fired several times, countless times. I've been satanic, sardonic, and sadistic all in one sentence. One of my colleagues was called the Antichrist. So we have a lot of interesting
There's
comments.
a lot of abuse coming in, to be honest, yes. You're not even good enough to be a professor yourself. How can you judge about my paper? Things like that.
Yes, that sort of thing. Or as a woman, my favorite was this was a telephone call that I was taking for another colleague of mine. It wasn't even my paper, but that colleague was in the office. And he had been talking with our support staff, who are mostly female. And so I pick up the phone and I said, how can I help you? And the person says, I don't mean to be chauvinistic, but. Now, no sentence in the history of mankind that started like that ended in a good way. But he wanted to know what my qualifications were because I was a woman. And he did not want to waste his time with another secretary. So, yeah, we get a lot of interesting...
Well, that's a mild word.
Yeah, there are sometimes very interesting exchanges, let's put it that way. We saw this, so ends the review process. Okay, I'm trying to get through this quickly. So now let's talk about the last key player, our referees. They represent the opinion of the community, and of course, again, we thank all of our referees for the help and support. This is the only time that we can really do that, when we're out in the field, so to say. If you receive a referral, how many of you have reviewed for us? I think I've asked this question before. Nobody has joined us. Okay. If you receive a referral as a new referee, let us know your intentions. So, decline promptly if you cannot review it. We really appreciate it if you can suggest referees. And respond to our reminders. We do send reminders often, and it's nice to get a response saying, I'll do it or not do it. Don't forget, you might be a referee now, but you'll be the author next time around. So you want your referees to also respond as promptly as possible. So there was this quote where we were talking about this. this does not count for very long papers or for review articles. But I will happily review this manuscript, but times are a bit hectic this day. What kind of time scales do you have in mind? Would 90 days be okay? Again, just don't forget, you're going to be the author, and would you like us to wait 90 days? Sometimes, if we really want that person's opinion for a particular reason, but it's usually, that doesn't usually happen that often. If you don't, one of the things that we really appreciate is if you write joint reports with your students and your postdocs. Because this is another way and then when you submit the report, tell us about the person that you've written it with, or even if it's a colleague. But with students and postdocs, it's good because they get trained, and then they get entered into the database, and the training process starts, and we can,
So this is how you do us a favor. This is how we find new people, and professors, of course, should work with their postdocs and students to to show them how it's done.
So I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask for the benefit of everybody else. If your advisor doesn't write a paper with you, can younger people add themselves to the database by contacting editors?
Yes, they can. They can do this, but we will check. I mean, obviously, we're going to check the publication record and all of that.
Because I've been asked by a couple of PhD students, actually, who graduated, they'd like to participate, and they weren't fortunate enough to referee a paper with their advisor.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yes, I mean, it's welcome.
Okay.
And then
So
we will
there's
check
a link on the website that you can go to, and then you can just give your name and we'll follow up.
Right.
So, preparing a referee report. What do? Review the manuscript and ensure that you understand the manuscript and the problem under study. Talk about the technical details, the validity, technical problems or comments, improvements. You can make comments about the reference list, style issues, conciseness of presentation, and then give us a recommendation. You either accept, reject, revise, and resubmit, etc. And always support your recommendation. Keep in mind to be timely, address the criteria, and sometimes we send a lot of the times, we send referees specific questions, and it's in the referral letter. We would very much appreciate it if you would answer those questions, because we want to draw your attention to something in particular. Substantiate your arguments, give clear recommendations, and no polemics, please. We've already gone through this before. This is the criteria. So when you review for the physical review journals, this is what we are looking for you to look for in the papers. I won't go through that since we've already that. And then, of course, in addition, as I said in my other talk, there are other additional criteria, like PRL has the broad interest criteria. We have to have strong ties to applications, and so on and so forth. Okay, quotes from referee reports. And these are usually the most interesting ones, because they're very open about this. This is an enormous leap of faith for the authors to take, and not one I'm willing to make. If I were in the author's position, this would cause me to lose sleep at night. On the positive side, the revised version is greatly improved. There are now only a large number of grammatical errors rather than a huge number. The paper should be rejected because for the following reasons. No one cares about this anymore. Anybody who could referee this is probably dead, and all who read it wish they were.
This is not exactly what we would forward.
Sorry?
This is not exactly what we would forward.
No. Oh, yes, that is a good point. I mean, we put all of this up, but obviously these are not being forwarded. These are not being forwarded to the authors. I mean, we would not allow this sort of thing to go to the authors. These are just things that we've picked out, and we do edit the report so that any such thing will be taken out. It is lamentable that facts established over 40 years ago are ignored. The influence of Trumpism on science, that's a more recent one. So I believe it was Wigner who said, it is nice that your computer understands the problem completely, but I would like to understand it a little too. Just because I did it quickly, please don't get the idea that I'm a good referee to dump a lot of future papers, on. I'm not always this prompt. I'm sorry that I've been so slow responding to this refereeing request. This is partly due to the Christmas holidays and partly because I could not stop myself from falling asleep whenever I attempted to read it. This paper fills a much-needed gap and should be rejected. I suggest that you send this paper to all of these people for review. I've moved on to other things sufficiently that I can't be spending the time to plow through its 57 pages. I'd rather read War and Peace. And last but not least, this is my all-time favorite. Not only is this paper wrong, I did it first. So, now these are quotes from authors that have sent, these could be queries or whatever it may be. According to your automatic author status inquiry system, one of the referees for our manuscript has not responded for 6 weeks. I wonder if I should be concerned about his well-being. Please check to see if perhaps some harm has befallen him. If not, could something be arranged? When we do not hear from the referee for several months, we are left with no alternative but to bother you. But this is, I think, my favorite. I was wondering if I could find out more about the latest status of our manuscript. I told my mother about my first submittal to physical review letters, and she won't stop bothering me about it. She keeps calling me to see if it's been accepted or not. I've been trying to tell her it's with the editors, but she's getting tired of hearing that. So sometimes authors are very creative to get our attention. So I think I've run through this quickly. So the physical review editors would like to thank you, authors and referees, for all our support. And we're sorry we messed up your last paper and rejected it. And if you're a referee, aren't you overdue for a report? So, thank you.
Thank you, Julie and Lawrence, for the nice presentation. Questions?
No questions.
We had already a few questions, more curiosities. Yeah, this is your chance
Wait a minute.
to talk to the editors.
Well, I announced in the beginning, so. No?
Any
I think everybody's tired.
Probably, but time for one question.
Okay, so if you receive a report that, it took something like 2 or 3 months and it's a short and brief report, is there any chance that, if this report is taken in consideration by the editor, is there any kind of, I don't know, in the appealing process, is there any, if I submit an appealing process, for instance, because of this short report, is there any kind of, I don't know, punishment or something like this for the editor or for the referee or something like this?
Oh, do we punish our referee?
Well, we don't punish our referees, but
No.
of course we note how long it took to get the report in, so we might not take that referee a second time. If you appeal, I mean, the DAE or the board member will see the whole file of the paper, so he will see that things took long, and he may think that we waited too long to get that report in, but depends on whether the paper is decisive or not.
Sometimes, I'm not speaking about only about the journals of APS, but sometimes is really boring to wait a lot of time, and then you see a really short report, and it's really annoying to know that the editor accepts that report after a long time of review, and so it's something that, you don't quite understand if your work is really not good enough, or what was happening with the review process, or even with the journal or something like this. So it's a strange situation.
Yeah, you'd like to know more why it's rejected, I guess. The point is that these things that take a long time usually are the bigger shots because they don't have time. And of course, editors know that, and they will probably weigh those reports a bit more extensively. That's what may be happening. But I agree. I mean, if you don't really get anything from the report and it's rejected, you could always ask for a bit more.
And I mean, we do realize that, and sometimes, you know, we wait 7 weeks, 8 weeks, and then we get this really short report that doesn't say a whole lot. Now we're faced with that dilemma. Do I go out again to try and get some new referees? And we have mechanisms to try and get referees. You know, we kind of bug them a little more and, you know, try to get them to tell us that they are going to do it, a commitment of some sort. Or do we send it to you and have you take a look at it and maybe make the paper better for the next round? So it's a judgment call, right?
It depends on whether it's really thrown out or not.
Right.
Sometimes it's also an idea if things take too long to force an appeal. So if you're rejected, sometimes that's what the editor wants.
More questions? Okay. If not, let's thank Julie and Lawrence again and all the speakers
And then you can
of
tell
this
them
afternoon session.
We have some goodies here.
goodies. Go ahead. There's some goodies here, so you can come and grab whatever